back then. If you figure that you could buy a cup of coffee for a nickel in 1946 after the war. I don't know how much a cup of coffee costs now. I don't drink it.
I think it's $1.50 or something like that.
$1.50, unless you want a latte or a latte with whatever. Anyway, that's the comparative. That's my comparative. That's my effort to compare the economy of 1945 to the economy of 2014. So, yeah, they spent a lot of money to rewrite history, and they left out all the spiritual um, implications and all the contacts and all the aliens. All that's been whitewashed from the account of World War II. Not only that, there were a few other details that they left out. According to Anthony C. Sutton, in a publication called Wall Street and the Rise of Hitler, he pulls examples of activities that happened during, preceding and during the war, mostly from documents, contractual documents, and different trials that occurred, including the Nuremberg trial. And he says, the Standard Oil group of companies in which the Rockefeller family owned a quarter and controlling interest was of critical assistance in helping Nazi Germany prepare for World War II. This assistance in military preparation came about because Germany's relatively insignificant supply of crude petroleum were quite insufficient for modern mechanized warfare. In 1934, for instance, about 85% of German finished petroleum products were imported. Now, if you remember back to earlier in our story, this was really a concern of the Vrill and the Thule Society. They really wanted to be energy independent, and I think at that time it didn't have much to do with the war. I think it was just energy independence. Okay, let me continue from Anthony Sutton's documents. The solution adopted by Nazi Germany was to manufacture synthetic gasoline from its plentiful domestic coal supplies. Now, I don't think the Vrill Society or the Thule Society would have gone there because they wanted to be independent, and this just makes you depend on another fossil fuel. But it was good for a war machine. Back to Sutton's stuff. It was the hydrogenation process of producing synthetic gasoline and isooctane properties in gasoline that enabled Germany to go to war in 1940. And this hydrogenation process was developed and financed by the Standard Oil laboratories in the United States in partnership with IG Farben. Now, IG Farben, if you know anything about World War II, was the same as Nazis. You know, like corporations and the government, when they blind together to be a totalitarian state, they become one thing. Well, IG Farben was Nazism. Now, the War Department had told Standard Oil Company not to do this for the Germans, but you know, who controls who there? Back to the document. Evidence presented to the Truman, Bone, and Kilgore committees after World War II confirmed that Standard Oil had at the same time, quote, seriously imperiled the war preparations of the United States, end quote. Documentary evidence was presented to all three congressional committees that before World War II, Standard Oil had agreed with IG Farben in the so-called JASCO agreement that synthetic rubber was within Farben's sphere of influence, while Standard Oil was to have an absolute monopoly in the U.S., if only and when Farben allowed development of synthetic rubber to take place in the U.S., which of course they wouldn't do. Farben wouldn't allow development of new petroleum-based rubber to be built in the United States, which is going to hamper the U.S. oil effort. Accordingly, concluded the Kilgore Committee, Standard fully accomplished IG's purpose of preventing the United States production by dissuading American rubber companies from undertaking independent research and developing synthetic rubber processes. Regrettably, the congressional committees did not explore an even more ominous aspect of this Standard Oil IG Farben collusion. That at this time, directors of Standard Oil of New Jersey had not only strategic warfare affiliations to IG Farben, but had other links with Hitler's Germany, even to the extent of contributing through German subsidiary companies to Heinrich Himmler's personal fund and with membership in Himmler's circle of friends as late as 1944. That's a year before the war ended. During World War II, Standard Oil in New Jersey was accused of treason for this pre-war alliance with Farben, even while its continuing wartime activities with Himmler's circle of friends were unknown. The accusations, of course, of treason were vehemently denied by Standard Oil. So I'm not sure. I haven't read the Rockefellers' history of the World War II, but I think that's probably not it, what I just read from Sutton's document.
Why would they put that in?
Well, why would they leave it out if it's a comprehensive,
No, it's a comprehensive history that they want the
American
public to know, not the real history.
Right. But I don't want you to think that the Rockefellers and Standard Oil were the only ones that helped Hitler kill your parents or grandparents. Let me go on with Sutton's document. This gets pretty interesting for me anyway. American involvement on Hitler's side includes other areas. The two largest tank producers in Hitler's Germany were Opel, a wholly owned subsidiary of General Motors, controlled by the J.P. Morgan firm, and the Ford AG subsidiary of Ford Motor Company of Detroit. The Nazis granted tax-exempt status to Opel in 1936 to enable General Motors to expand its production facilities. 1936, this is right before, this is gearing up the war. General Motors obligingly invested the resulting profits into German industry. Henry Ford was decorated by the Nazis for his service to Nazism. Alcoa and Dow Chemicals worked closely with Nazi industry in numerous transfers of other domestic U.S. technology. Bendix Aviation, which the J.P. Morgan-controlled General Motors firm had a major stock interest, supplied Siemens and Halske AG in Germany with data on automatic pilots and aircraft instruments. As late as 1940, in the unofficial war, Bendix Aviation supplied complete technical data to Robert Bosch for aircraft and diesel engine starters and received royalty payments in return. In brief, American companies associated with the Morgan Rockefeller International Investment Bankers were intimately related to the growth of Nazi industry. It's important to note that General Motors, Ford, General Electric, DuPont, and the handful of U.S. companies ultimately involved in the development of Nazi Germany were, except for the Ford Motor Company, controlled by Wall Street elite. The J.P. Morgan firm, the Rockefeller Chase Bank, and to a lesser extent the Warburg Manhattan Bank. This is an indictment of the apex. Those firms controlled through the handful of financial houses, the Federal Reserve Bank system, the Bank for International Settlements, and their controlling international cooperative arrangements and cartels, which attempt to control the course of world politics and economics, and pretty much do up to this day, I would say. I mean, if you know what's going on in the world, if you know what's going on in Greece, if you know the international economics, you know that it's totally controlled by the bankers and they're taking us down. They're taking us down. All right, let me just sum up this little odyssey that we've taken you through in this podcast. We started out with the legend of the Vrill Society and the underworld people that live exclusively by use of the Vrill. And then we went to Maria Orsic and the Vrill Society and the Thule Society, making contact with the Aldebarans, who supposedly channeled plans for a flying saucer, which was built and then rebuilt and then finally adopted by the SS at the end of the war and flew around. I have seen documents that show that they were involved in fighting with the Allied planes. These saucers were. Of course, there's all kind of evidence and all kind of tales of the Foo Fighters and other things that were involved in Germany. It's said that in 1941, Britain knew that Hitler had this type of technology. And anyway, the war continues, the war ends, the Allies finally win, and all of a sudden the United States government, under Harry Truman and Admiral Forrestal, showed great interest in Antarctica. So Admiral Byrd, of course, launches an expedition which goes there, comes back right away after encountering heavy losses, and reports to the powers that be, and tells them about what they found. Of course, the U.S. and us common folk never did know what they found, but through his diary, which was subsequently made public, we found that he encountered something that might have been akin to the Vrill civilization that was written about. The fictitious Vrill civilization was written about by Lytton. So it kind of comes full circle. We also in there mentioned the War of the Worlds and how that was an attempt by the cabal, mainly the Rockefellers in that instance, to create scenarios, create false scenarios so that, you know, people will fall in and believe the scenario and jump off a bridge if they're told to, or, you know, react in fear. And they became really a master at that. And they attempted to do that, or I guess they actually did it. The Rockefellers commissioned the rewriting of history after World War II to exclude any notion of flying saucers, any notion of channeling, spiritual involvement, secret societies,
underground
civilizations, or, of course,
and the energy itself, the free energy.
Free energy, which, of course, would certainly cut into the Standard Oil Company's profits.
Right.
If there were free energy. But anyway, the Rockefeller version of World War II also just probably didn't happen to include all the financial involvements with Wall Street and Standard Oil Company and Ford Motor Company and General Motors in helping the Nazi war machine get off the ground and stay off the ground until 1945, when the war ended. So anyway, that's to make a long story short, that's where we ended up.
And what a circuitous route it was. But it looks like that's all the time we have for this podcast. So we want to thank you all for tuning in and joining us, and stay tuned for discussion afterwards if you're listening to us on Blog Talk Radio. Look for our show notes on the show if you want to go more into some of this information, which is absolutely fascinating. Check out the show notes, which we have on our blog, pineconeutopia.yolasite.com. And while you're there, check out Paul's new book, Belief Magic, Decoding the Belief Matrix, because we think you'll really love reading that book as well. So until next time, be nice to each other. Catch you on the flip side.